All right, we are back. Season preview, episode 3 of the Reporter's Corner. I'm one half your co-host, Jared Rubado with the Bemidji Pioneer. With me is the better half of the co-host, Trent Singer from Sioux Falls Live. Trent, how are we doing today?
Doing good, Jared. How you doing?
Fantastic. JJ McCarthy's awesome. We are recording this the day after JJ McCarthy powered the Vikings to victory, and one half of this podcast hosting duo is on cloud nine. Trent, how's your football team doing?
Let's talk about hockey, man. I am excited for hockey season. No, we had a great chat here today with we're going to change the subject. I'm not going to entertain this from you. We had a great chat today. We've had 2 great episodes already so far with Alex Micheletti and David Brown, but I really enjoyed this one with Harrison Watt. Such great insight, a former SID, former play-by-play guy at Ferris State, had some really good insight on a team that, Jared, I think you and I can both say is I think the most intriguing team in the conference this year. There's certainly some intrigue amongst all the teams in this conference and a lot of questions that, hopefully the people that we have on here in the coming weeks will be able to answer. But this Ferris State team is really interesting to me. They welcome 13 new faces into this team this year. Obviously, a new head coach takes over in Brett Riley, and he replaces a legend in Bob Daniels, who was there for 33 years. We got some good Bob Daniels stories out of Harrison to start this thing. And then, obviously we got into the season preview stuff and just kind of his thoughts on guys who we're keeping an eye on with this Ferris State team. They got 5 Long Island transfers amongst their 13 new transfers that they're bringing in. No freshmen, which is certainly an interesting dynamic amongst a team in this conference. Because I think they're the only team in this conference that doesn't have a freshman class. They do have 2 redshirt freshmen. But there are no true freshmen on this team, and it's certainly a team to keep an eye on. I am just curious to see how things mesh with this team. They lost some key pieces in guys like Cole Birch and I believe was it Caleb Ergang, or there was a couple other faces that are gone that transferred out. But I'm just really, really interested to see kind of what this Ferris State team looks like. And we got some really good perspective from Harrison on kind of what all that entails. Jared, this is a team that I think you and I both have slotted on the bottom of this conference, and it wouldn't surprise us at all if they ended up slotting themselves into that 4-5-3 spot.
Yeah, I think we got into it a little bit with Harrison about how I think all 3 of us kind of think that 1 through 7 in some respect is a little bit interchangeable. And Ferris State's right there just because there is so much unknown. And like you said, we dove into that with Harrison of just, what players could be coming back that could take a next step, what transfers could solidify them. We go into the Ferris State will have a successful season if blank happens, where he had some really good insight on that. And we talked a lot about goalies. What does Ferris State look like in net this year with Hobie Hedquist and Noah Ruprecht? So, but if you like Bob Daniels stories, you like some Tom Serratori stories mixed into, this is going to be a good one. This, like you said, Trent, this was one of my favorite episodes I think we've ever recorded because it was fun to rewind the clock whenever we could with Harrison.
And I will give a slight spoiler. If you're a Michigan Tech fan, stick around. You're going to enjoy a little bit of what Harrison has to say.
Or you could turn it off. You could just
leave.
Download, subscribe, and just turn it off. And keep your modest expectations. And do not harass our guest in a Discord. So, but anyways, it was a great chat with Harrison. This is one of our, I think, no shade to Alex Micheletti or DB, but this was my favorite of the first 3, just with all the Bob Daniels stories intertwined, and truly a guy who had a lot of insight into the man that Bob Daniels is and was for Ferris State. So let's get into it. Let's kick it over to our interview with Harrison Watt. It's time for another one. I believe this is our 3rd interview of 9, and we're talking dogs today. We're going all the way over to Big Rapids. We're talking about Ferris State, and we have Harrison Watt on to talk about the Bulldogs. Harrison, thanks for joining the show. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing well.
Doing good, man.
We're ready for hockey season.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, this is like we said, this is our third episode here, and to give a little bit of backstory, if you missed the first two, we're trying to bring on a representative of each team, and we want to dive in a little bit deep into each team heading into this season. So, Harrison, talk about your involvement with Ferris State. How did you grow close with the program, and how did it bring you here today?
Yeah, so I broadcasted for the team from, from I got to think about the numbers here, 2015 to 2023. Before that, I was covering them for our student newspaper. Was an intern somewhere in the middle there. So, been around the team for a long time, moved to Seattle for the last 2 years. My wife and I just moved back to Michigan. So interesting timing. They make a new coach hire. I've been around a little bit. I've seen them skate a few times. Gotten to meet the coaching staff a little bit. One of them I know really well is a Ferris alum, Justin DiMartino. So we've kind of been in talks for a long time. It was funny when they were doing the interviews for the head coach position. Justin DiMartino and I were texting all the time. He was like, it would be a dream job for me to go back to Ferris as an assistant coach. So I don't want to say I got the guy hired because I definitely did. But I definitely sent a few texts to people in the administration that I knew. And I was like, hey, it's going to be whoever you hire as a head coach's decision. But, if he comes up on your list, give him a phone call. Smart guy, very passionate, younger, and I think kind of a good energy that a new coach would be looking for.
Now, I want to ask you too. Were you always involved with hockey growing up that kind of got you into hockey broadcasting, or was that more of an acquired taste once you got there?
Yeah, the running joke in the league with the other broadcasters when they would ask me that question was I would answer, I played water polo and I swam. And so I got a lot of water polo jokes from, Mike Sullivan back in the day, Dirk Hembroff a little bit. So I got poked and teased a little bit early on because I was also a lot younger than most of the broadcasters in the league. I was just a fan growing up. I picked it up when I was like 9-10 years old and was addicted to the Red Wings, and that hasn't gone so well lately. So I've kind of turned my attention back towards college, got some high hopes this year. So
yeah, and what would you say, 2015 to 2013? There were some real good Ferris State teams in that stretch. How does that kind of make that easier to fall in love with the sport a little bit when they're putting entertaining products on the ice, and there is a juice and a vibe in the building when you're there behind the mic, and you can kind of see things building and see a real small community like that, like so many CCHA teams have, where they really when they start building some momentum in kind of that dream season, or a season where they maybe exceed expectations, where that momentum just carries a little bit further in a small town.
Yeah, so I got to Ferris my freshman year right after they went to the national championship game.
Right.
So they're coming off that. And obviously the energy on campus for it was enormous. The first year they were kind of 500-ish. Then we moved in the WCHA and we won 29 games. Probably should have beat North Dakota in the second round of the tournament. We got goalied by Zane McIntyre, I think it was. So I had really high hopes at that point. We went through another 500-ish year, came back, and we were mostly 500, got hot, and made it to the Elite Eight again and ran into one of David Montgomery's Denver teams. It was a year Brock Besser was at North Dakota. So we would have got them in the next round had we beat Denver. And we were in that game until the last, maybe 6 minutes when Denver finally took off. I think we were tied right at the end. So when I got hired full time, I was coming into a situation where the team was awesome and was coming off a lot of great momentum. They went on a dip. And when you're a young broadcaster, I think it's the best thing in the world is for you not to immediately get the payoff of, just walking into the perfect job. So you gotta learn how to fill time. A lot of times I'm working without a color commentator, so you got to learn how to pick the positives out of the games that were kind of tough, the weekends that were tough, weekends at Mankato where you get dropped, 10, 12, 14 goals on, and you're trying to be like, all right, where are the positives here? We started to kind of move some guys out of the roster that didn't really fit the culture, guys graduated and moved on, and we recruited really well in terms of getting the right kinds of guys. And it got better towards the end. We went on the road, won a playoff series at Bowling Green my last year. And I felt like from that point, they'd kind of cleared the deck and started over. And I felt like as I walked out the door that things were in a good place for them to start building back towards a good positive future. And, to the point of the community, it's such a small rink. I love that rink. It's such a quirky place to play. I've seen some of the weirdest goals ever. I've seen goalies, Blake Pietala comes to mind. We scored a bunch of goals on him from like the corner. And I swear to God, Blake was like looking around seeing ghosts. It's such a weird, freaky rink. Stuff happens. We have the tempered glass. So I've seen pucks bounce off the glass, hit the back of the goalie, and go in the net, like weird stuff like that. It's such a fun rink to do games in.
The BSU players that I've covered in 3 years now and Saratori have legit horror stories of playing in the rink, where I think last year one of them, after playing in a road series against Ferris, I asked him, I was like, hey, what was your first time playing in that rink? Tom always talks about the boards and how it's like almost like a corner behind the goal. That's how it works. And he goes, yeah, first thing we ever did when we go out and skate during our first skate, the Thursday before a game, like they put all the pucks right in the slot, threw them to the corner. And Tom's like, where do you think this puck's going to go? And instead of it going somewhere where it's supposed to go, it rims around. He's like, this rink's going to give you all kinds of problems, boys. And he's just ripping pucks in the corners, and they're going all different directions. And yeah, the legit horror stories of Oweglevon and the obviously the goal. It's a nightmare for goalies, like you said.
Yeah. First of all, your Tom impression is so spot on.
Yeah. I've had some practice.
Years ago, we played Bemidji in a weekend series where one of our chillers went out, and it was during an intermission, or it was maybe like the end of the first period. So like, there's no immediate effect to that, but then you go to cut the ice with the hot water and it's not refreezing. And so Bemidji's end is just a pool. And so we go to start the second period. This doesn't happen that often. It was like a random, I think that chiller's been replaced since, but like, we go to start the second period. The refs are like, okay, we clearly cannot play on this. Like the puck is not moving. Like you go to move the puck and it just sticks in a little, spot of water. And, they start to dry it up. Our facilities guy comes out and goes, well, just try and dry it up as best you can. Let's see if we can go. So we go and start the second period. A guy, I can't remember who it was, but one of the Bemidji defensemen tries to throw a pass from behind his own net out into the neutral zone, and it sticks in a puddle of water, and one of our guys comes right down the slot, picks it up, and scores a goal. And Tom is incensed. I'm just like, I'm calling the game. I want to see if I can find the highlight of this. I can't remember what night it happened, but I just remember calling the goal and be like, wow, that's a fortunate bounce.
Oh, my God.
He was
that's amazing.
Holy cow. We'll start getting into this year for the Dogs, but I think the best place to start with that is Bob Daniels and the transition from Bob Daniels to Brett Riley. And you got to work with Bob for a long time. Talk to me about him and the kind of culture he established there, and how easy or how difficult it'll be to transition to a new coach.
Yeah, Bob is he's one of my favorite people. Such a funny guy. One of the funniest guys in college hockey. Very understated funny.
Yeah.
Good example of this with Bemidji. We lost a game in a shootout on the road there, where Jay Dickman scored the shootout winning goal, and we're all in the green mill after because it's -30 outside Bemidji in the winter. Like, we're not going anywhere. We're just gonna go hotel restaurant. And Jay Dickman and Tom Saratori walk in, and Jay was super polite, great kid. But he was just like, yeah, I've always enjoyed watching your teams, to Bob. And Bob goes, well, it didn't really seem like it tonight. So like, just like always, even after a loss, it's like such great wit. Good prankster too. I got a lot of,
oh yeah.
I don't even know where to start with those, but
yeah. He told us about the Mackinac Bridge with the freshmen. That seemed like a classic one. And I brought it up to Taylor I think right after we recorded it. That might have been that day, Jared.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with Taylor, and I brought this. I just started I literally was just like, Bob was telling us about a prank, and he goes, "Oh, the Mackinac Bridge." And like it described it. He's just like, "That one's a classic." He's like, "There's a bunch though."
Yeah, I'll save one for the end of the pod, just to keep people listening here for you. But
there you go.
Obviously,
I love it.
Did a great job roster building in a place that's not easy to roster build.
Absolutely.
Big Rapids, Michigan is. I love it as a college town. It is pretty isolated. It's, you're in a state where you've got Michigan State already. Western Michigan obviously just won a national championship. They're a power. That's a great college environment. Obviously, you go to the UP. Michigan Tech is one of the great environments in all of college sports that people don't really know about. Northern Michigan is gorgeous. Marquette's a beautiful town. You got Lake State up there as well. And so you think about like all the college hockey powers in Michigan, and he had to recruit against that with limited resources, with a small rink. And, again, you're playing every night, every weekend. It's like, oh, Ohio State's in town. Oh, Notre Dame's in town. And you got to compete with that every night. He did it his way, and I respect the way he did it. They got inventive recruiting. The 2003 team is a great example of that. Obviously, they had Chris Kunitz, but when I talked to the former associate head coach, Drew Famulak, he said, we had Mark Giordano and Pat Maroon also committed to that team. And they Giordano ended up going in the OHL. Pat Maroon couldn't get into school. And it was, which I'm sure is not super surprising at the time. I mean, he's obviously grown up a lot, but like imagining that team where you have Mark Giordano, Pat Maroon, and Chris Kunitz. They went on the road to Minnesota in the NCAA tournament against Team Grant Patoli was on, and they lost the game like 7-4. Kunitz was injured in it, but then you think like, imagine if you had these other two like NHLers in there, how much different would that have gone? So, I think he's a guy that very narrowly missed 2 national titles. And doing that at a Big Rapids is, it's a tall task. And Brett Riley has got some big shoes to fill. He's going to fill them in a very different way. I'll give you that. He's a very different guy. I like him a lot. I have a lot of respect for him. It's weird that the coach of the team is now basically my age.
Yeah, right.
The coach was basically my dad's age. So that's been a big difference, kind of getting used to that now.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, right? Because when you were talking about Ferris and the local competition around him, well, obviously with Michigan and Michigan State, all the UP schools, even Ohio State, in terms of recruiting, right? That's a team that's always going to be in there in recruiting, Notre Dame. And it's pretty similar to, I think, a lot of CCHA schools where, all those teams in the UP are kind of recruiting against the same thing. Bemidji, right? They're recruiting against Minnesota, North Dakota, St. Cloud, St. Thomas, Mankato. Augustana, it's North Dakota, Omaha, Minnesota, Mankato, St. Thomas, right? Like when it comes to those longevity coaches, it's even more impressive that they were able to find that longevity when the cards are kind of stacked against them in terms of resources and financial backing that in this new era, a lot of those bigger programs have where other teams in the CCHA are kind of struggling to get. And that's going to be my kind of the thing I want to see how it develops for Ferris State is how does this culture look and this approach look to building a CCHA roster change under a new coach who, hasn't been doing this for 30 years like Bob Daniels was and had made his way through all the different eras of college hockey.
Yeah, he's, for starters, he's incredibly intense. I've noticed that right away. Not necessarily like in a mean way or anything, just like very locked in all the time.
Some would call it military, intent.
Yeah, exactly. You're so spot on with that. And again, it's a young staff. Everybody is like, I think I don't know how old Zach Sizek is, but I'm pretty sure everybody's 35 and under just about.
It's young.
Yeah,
it's younger. And you're talking about you're leaving a staff of guys who were there for 20 plus years, right? Like,
yeah. So like the shortest tenured guy was Dave Sensor, who was 20 plus years.
20, yeah.
It was over 2 different stints.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Kaufman was in the same boat, but it was like he was there in the early 90s, left to coach pro hockey, came back
25 years.
Yeah. So, and then Drew Famulak was there the entire time.
Yep.
So, I mean, you're talking about you've taken the experience factor out, but you have a lot of good young energy, and youth. I heard Brett Hall say this the other day. Youth enthusiasm will take you so far, but experience is what matters in the playoffs. It was something he said about the 2002 Red Wings team, and I think that it's a very mature young group. They know what they're getting at. I like that they brought in. I don't think you always need to hire an alum as the head coach at a school. I think sometimes it could be a nice thing, especially at a school like Ferris. And there were great alum candidates that, Taylor Nelson would have been the guy that, like, before I knew about Brett Riley, I looked at Taylor Nelson and was like, you got to go hire that guy. That guy's awesome. And he's going to be a great head coach in college hockey one day. But they did a good.
He's already done it. He's already done it, Harrison.
Yeah. No, he's totally brilliant. But you just, I don't know. It's hard to describe. I think the AD did a great job of locking on his guy, getting his guy, and then that guy did a great job of filling his gaps. Like, where am I deficient? Where do I need to shore up experience? And one of those things is, I think, hiring an alum candidate as an assistant coach, where it's somebody that's attached to the program that has emotional investment in it. And now you've kind of completed the circle, and it's just a matter of, can you get the right guys in here, from a team standpoint? Can you get the right fits? Can you get the guys that are going to develop, and can you develop them? And I think I like what I've seen so far. I think they're emphasizing some things that over the last several years that maybe we weren't super strong in, even though we tried to develop. Sometimes just hearing it from a different person or hearing it in a different way makes a big difference.
Yeah, I want to start jumping into it because this team is intriguing. It's to me, and I think Jared can agree, it's the most intriguing team in this conference. I'm not sure what to make of Ferris State, and it feels like I've got the top of this league sorted out fairly well. I don't know where we go with Ferris State. I don't know where they play into this. This is a team that brings in 13 transfer portal additions, no freshmen,
no true freshmen. They have a couple
true freshmen. That's right. They do have a couple red shirts. I did notice that on the roster, which was a smart choice because otherwise you're going to have a class of no freshmen here in like 4 years of. I think it's an interesting team from that standpoint. I don't know that there's another team in all of college hockey that's like this. Maybe it's a new norm that we'll start seeing when you see a new coach come in and obviously take a lot of his guys. He brings 5 Long Island guys with him to Ferris State, and we'll get into that a little bit too. But I'm curious to know from your perspective here, Harrison. Like I said, 13 new guys that are all transfer portal additions. When you look at this roster and kind of the guys that are coming in here and that are coming back from last year's team as well, is there a player that stands out that you see as sort of a points leader for this Ferris State team, and who is that?
From a goal scoring perspective, I really like Tyler Schleppe. I loved him as a freshman. I feel like he went through a bit of a lull in his development. Sometimes guys do that. I think they're going to find ways to unlock him. He's got a great shot. He's a big body. He's strong. I don't know that he's quite the puck handler to be a big assists and points guy. Maybe that's something that will continue to improve with him, but he can absolutely flat out shoot it. I think he's, a big factor in that. You brought up a good point. There's 13 new guys. It's not just that there's 13 new guys. You got to mesh 3 groups together. You got to mesh the 16 returners. You got to mesh the 13 new guys and 5 guys that played for Brett before. So like 5 guys are going to know Brett's shorthand. The rest of the team is not. And the rest of the team, maybe they played together a little in juniors or against each other a little bit in juniors. But this is a team that largely is not going to know most of the guys next to them. So meshing that, I think, is going to be pretty tricky early on. I think you're going to see some miscommunications and, guys are going to know the shorthand. Guys aren't going to know the shorthand. They have a tough early schedule. They got to go to Western Michigan on national championship banner night. Western Michigan's going to raise 3 banners before the game. And then the Lawson Lunatics. Have either of you guys ever been to Lawson?
No, I would love to.
It's a bucket.
It is the most mayhem of anywhere I've been in any college.
That's what I've heard.
One of the most chaotic sporting environments I've ever been in. Just I can't even describe it. So right from the get-go, you're going to find out what these guys are about. I think from a point standpoint, I really liked Max Itagaki when he came over. He had kind of a tough year last year, missed some games with injury and stuff. I think he's going to probably take a step forward. Obviously, guys like Josh Zary had a lot of success, and Carter Apology. I'm probably pronouncing Carter's last name wrong, but
don't worry. We have already gone through this with other episodes. We don't know how to pronounce these names yet, and that's on the SIDs.
Yeah. Well, the guy that replaced me is a good buddy of mine. I probably should have texted him, actually. But I like those guys too. And then another guy I think is kind of intriguing is Jack Messick coming back. Mm-hmm. Jack was a freshman defenseman for Ferris, was very talented. Transferred to Western, didn't play like almost at all last year, won a national title, realized, I think I want to go back. And he comes back, and he's talented, good right shot defenseman. I think they're very deep on defense, which is going to make them interesting. I think the teams in the CCHA that have typically been the most successful have either been the ones that are super deep on defense or have like your high octane offense, like the Minnesota States of the world.
Yeah. And I think when I look at this roster, even with all of the additions that come in, you mentioned some players that have the ability to maintain at least the toughness identity from a year ago and even 2 years ago. That's, in talking with some other coaches, that was the toughest part about playing Ferris State. It didn't matter if you played them on the road or at home. It was always that, you are going to have to work to get what you get against Ferris State. And I look at a guy like Xavier Jean-Louis, just a tough defenseman. He's not going to put up, 15, 20 points in a year, but he is going to hold the blue line, and he is going to kind of punish you in a neutral zone. But with that, there were some departures from last year who also fit that role. I look at a Zach Fairmouth, who won a ton of faceoffs and was an absolute hell to deal with for opposing centers. I look at a Nico DeVeda, who, he only had 4 points last year, but when it came to making the right play and the smart play, so many times guys like that were able to do that when Ferris State was playing well. How tough is it to maintain some of that identity going from a new one coach to another, having 13 new players come into this program and dealing with all this change?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I'm trying to remember exactly how big Riley Wallach is. 6'6", 245.
Yeah, he's massive. I've seen him in person, man. He is big.
Riley Wallach is an interesting way to bring the toughness part of it back. Yeah. I've talked to Brody Kaiser, who's the broadcaster at Ferris right now, and he's like, he's scary. Like, he's scary moving around on the ice. 245 pounds is like, NFL linebacker. He's a big boy. I don't want to be on the other side of that. Valtteri Pirinen's also got a little bit of that too. I don't think he's quite the same size, but I think they brought in some replacements for size. You bring in some guys from the Big Ten, and they were guys that were at the bottom of the lineup there, just didn't get a chance. But I think from a toughness perspective, I don't think they're going to be short on that. I think from what I'm hearing out of the practices is it's rough, it's physical, it's very football. I think our toughness identity at Ferris, there were times where that was really true. There were times kind of in the middle of my tenure where it was not true, where we just weren't pushing guys around. I think it's probably that's going to be more ramped up. I think we might be a little less offensive than we were a year ago, and probably a little bit meaner than we were a year ago. And, whether or not that pans out in wins, we'll find out, but it's definitely going to wear people down. And I always felt like, in the middle of my tenure, the area we really struggled were the last two periods of a weekend where, if we hadn't necessarily worn the other team down, we were probably the ones, if you're not the hammer, you're the nail. Right. I think this team is probably going to be the hammer, and that might be underselling it. From what I've understood talking to people, they're mean, and they're really mean along the walls. And obviously, we talked about the rink at Ferris. If they say 70 to 80% of the game is played against the walls in most of hockey, it's probably like 90% of Ferris. So
right.
It's not going to be a very comfortable place to play.
Trent, you got the next one?
Yeah. Let's jump into some strengths and weaknesses. I'm curious to know, is there anything you can ID at this point, in terms of this team and its makeup that you can identify as something that you feel like they're particularly good at, and maybe something that you're kind of waiting to see. Maybe some questions that need to be answered a little bit on the weakness side.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with weaknesses. I think the strength is going to be physical strength and size and just general meanness. I think that will show pretty quickly. The biggest questions I have, I guess, would be power play would be to start. Who's on it? You lose Caden Galt from a year ago, who's like big shot guy, can really shoot it. You've lost some guys in that respect. I'm not saying that they don't have the guys to do it. They've got other guys. They've got transfers that have those skills from their time in junior. I really like Jack Messick going back there. I think he was really good on the power play. They definitely have some guys. It's just what kind of power play alignment are they going to run? How is it going to look different than a year ago? That I think is my first big question about them. I think the other big question is goaltending. And it's not because I don't think they're good. I just don't really know what they are. Hobie Hedquist had a really great start to his college career. From the sounds of it, up and down a little bit in camp, but I think he probably has the highest end ability in the group. It's just trying to get that out of him. Noah Ruprecht, I think, did a great job for Brett Riley last year. You look at a little bit of the schedule in there too, and you wonder, like, okay, how big are some of those numbers? But he did win some big games for them. So I would imagine he'll probably get the first go at it. I'm interested to see what that room looks like. I thought Noah West did a really great job last year, and that was a strength. After not playing a lot his first several years in college hockey, I thought really laid it all on the line and played well. And that I think has kind of been a strength of Ferris for a few years is even when the save percentage numbers weren't excellent, they were still getting solid to good goaltending. It was just a matter of team defense and stuff like that. So, I think team defense will be better. I think their physical capabilities will be better. I'm interested to see where the goals come from, the power play, and what the goalies look like.
And I think that's a inherent thing when you're talking about a new coach coming in. I mean, I feel like Michigan Tech's going to learn this the hard way early on as well. You see at Augustana just even a couple years ago, they're still trying to figure it out when you talk about special teams and really getting that power play and that penalty kill going. But here's the plus side, I think, for Ferris State. And Harrison, maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit more. They were last in the conference in both penalty kill and power play last season. So there's nowhere to go for them but up. Do you see that as a plus in a lot of ways? Is like kind of bringing somebody in new energy, maybe kind of dialing that in a little bit more, as it's gonna happen regardless, right? Like you're gonna bring in a new guy, and if you're gonna bring in a new guy, that sort of stuff is gonna have to develop as it kind of goes on, anyways.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Ferris, Ewigleben is a really tough power play rink because of where the pucks end up. We talked about the pucks getting funneled to the back of the net.
Yeah.
It's not a rink that usually lends itself to good power play. So it should lend itself to good penalty kill. I think, there were some interchanging parts last year. There were some times when the penalty kill did look good for short stretches. Maybe guys just overthinking or guys, getting into the wrong spots. I think sometimes, zooming out and getting a different set of eyeballs on it, not necessarily a smarter set of eyeballs or more, definitely less experienced in terms of age of years.
Right.
Sometimes guys will see something different or find ways to simplify those systems. And I think that could help them along a lot this year. Again, with the physical toughness, I expect their penalty kill to be better. I think because physically you've got guys that are going to take up a little bit more space. Like, again, Riley Wallach takes up a lot of, general area, just like a lot of volume of space where he's standing. I don't know that he's going to be a penalty killer himself, but like, I just would think that they're going to find better ways to get into gaps and stuff and gap correctly. I don't know. Penalty kill is the one area I feel like they're going to take a big step forward. Power play, again, it's such a chemistry thing with power play because you got to know where people are going to be and trust that they're going to be there. And you have so many new guys that nobody knows that I think that could be an area where early on it's like, that might be, you could see some scuffles or weird turnovers that lead to goals and stuff. But there are guys I like there. One guy I didn't mention was I like Max Dukovac. I've always liked him. I felt like he's like inch away here and there from like going off at Miami some years. Every time I saw him play against Ferris, is like there's like something to that guy. If they can just get like the last 3% out of him, I think he's a guy that can offensively really light it up for them.
I want to go back to the goalies too, because this is the most intriguing. One of the most. I think there's a few big question marks, right? Like, what is Lake State going to do at goal this year? Do they go back to Rourke Appleby for 30 plus games again? What does Bemidji State do in goal with a junior there, but also the WHL goalie of the year coming in? But when I look at Ferris, this is arguably the most intriguing goalie situation preseason, because like you said, you have Hobie Hedquist and Noah Ruprecht coming in, who at times, like Ruprecht had a really solid year last year. You mentioned how Hobie Hedquist had some really bright moments for North Dakota. I look at Hobie Hedquist as a really good candidate to have just a breakout year, because when it was going well for him at North Dakota, it was a lot of people clamoring for him to be the guy, the number one goalie during his true freshman season. But you remove him from the atmosphere and the pressure of playing in that, psychotic college hockey market in front of all those people, and you say, hey, let's let the game slow down for you just a little bit. Let's throw you in here where we are going to play a more defensive, physical first structure that the CCHA demands. Maybe it's just able to simplify the game for him a little bit more and max out that potential. I love the idea of Ferris State having a true 1A, 1B tandem here, kind of going back to the Bob Daniels heyday, where, if you have two goalies, you're in a really, really good spot. And, I don't know who's going to win out. Obviously, it's when you have two goalies going into a playoff run, it can work, but most of the time you like to have the one guy. But this is a really, really intriguing position battle for this conference.
Yeah, I think, and this is probably so cliche, I think goaltending is like 99% confidence.
Yeah.
Like you get in there and you have one of those games, even if you don't necessarily play particularly well, or a puck just kind of bounces off you the right way and stays out here and there. Like once you start to get those bounces, that's when guys start to like get hot and go off. I like it. I always hate to bring this up because it ruined my childhood when I was like 9 years old. When the Red Wings played the Ducks in the first round of the 2003 playoffs, I went to game 2, and it was when Jaguar was in net for the Ducks, when he won the Conn Smythe when they lost the Stanley Cup. I can very clearly remember he had his back turned to the play. The net was almost open, and Brett Hull's like wide open in the slot. And Jaguar just kind of stuck his glove out backwards, and Brett Hull, 700-plus goals of him, shot it right into his glove. And from that moment on, I think Jaguar was like .951. And he had been good in game 1, too. But, like, sometimes when you make the stop, and I think that was probably Hobie's problem in North Dakota, is when you don't make the stop, you wonder what's going to happen when the next one comes at me, and the next one, and the next one. And you start to overcorrect. And I think that's probably that, and the pressure of the market probably got to him. So I think it could take some time to tease it out of him. But if he can go in at some point and get like string together 1 or 2 or 3 good starts in a row, I do think he's like a candidate to go off and be, a guy that lives in the 920s and a guy that can, put up 2 or 3 shutouts in a season. I really liked when they got him because I think he's got a lot of projectable talent. It's just a matter of putting him in a position to get confidence. Whereas I think Brett knows what he has in Noah Ruprecht, and I don't know what his high end skill looks like. I only honestly saw film from a few games here and there, so I can't really tell you like, oh, Noah Ruprecht is this or that.
Right.
But I think off the bat he's probably going to get the go. You never know. Camp could go differently, and Noah could get hurt or something like that, or Noah could have a rough week and they could go with Hobie. But it's all confidence. If he can get in, and if I can get in and get confident early, that's where the room I think is really interesting.
I think the other interesting thing, and it jumps off the page, and we talked about how there are no true freshmen, no kids coming in from any junior league at all. But when you look at the CCHA, you have Bowling Green, who brought in 10 CHL kids. Bemidji State brought in 7. You have a few teams. Michigan Tech, they brought in Trent 7 or 8 this year.
Yeah, something like that.
A ton of them. And then you have Augustana, Minnesota State, and Ferris State, who brought in none. And that's not to say that it was a bad job recruiting or anything. We said this on our preview episode with Augustana and Minnesota State, that there is no one way to recruit a winning hockey team anymore. But I'm curious for Brett Riley how the recruiting model will change for him going from an independent school to a conference school. We had him on in the summer, and he talked about when you're an independent coach, you're not only trying to recruit players to play for your team, but you're trying to recruit other schools to let them play you. You let them welcome you into their barn, play 20 road games a year, and grind it out through that independent schedule. But now that he is in a conference and he is the head coach of an affiliated team, I wonder how that changes the recruiting strategy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, for starters, I think they are going to go after a lot of freshmen or incoming freshmen going forward. They're going to recruit not, perfectly traditionally or anything like that. I think part of it is like you get the head coach change, and I don't think Ferris had a lot of guys committed to begin with.
One that I saw.
Gavin Giesbrecht, I think it was.
That was it. That was literally all I ever saw all off season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might have gotten an inkling that maybe the coaching staff was going to, retire and move on. Mm-hmm. So it can be hard to recruit to that. So I think Brett walked into a situation where he was like, all right, there really aren't a lot of guys committed here to begin with. Why don't I hit the portal? This is the fast way to bring in adult bodies, at least for 1 year as a good, strong life raft, to build in like a good floor. At that point, I think they're going to go and start to develop their recruiting strategy. I've talked to the staff a little bit, and certain guys are dealing with the CHL, certain guys are dealing with the USHL. I think, probably with the introduction of the CHL and now those guys know that they have to take certain classes to get into college, I think more of those guys will filter into college hockey. I think early on that was going to be tough. But I think that's where you'll see things like the NAHL will start to really suffer in terms of getting guys committed. So I think the staff is really focused probably first on bringing in true freshmen. I think the transfer portal is it can be a great thing. It can be used in a great way. Sam Morton at Minnesota State's, one great example of that. Zach Driscoll at Bemidji State, another great example of that. Like you can go back and grab them over time. Those guys can be great. They can also be, I think there's always a reason a guy's in the transfer portal. That doesn't always mean it's a bad reason on their part. But sometimes guys go into the portal because they caused their own problems and they haven't fixed them yet. So I think if you try to hit the portal too much, it becomes hard to build a good, strong culture because you just have kind of transient guys coming in and out. So I think in a place like Big Rapids, culture has to be the first building block to being a great team. So you have to get guys that are here for long periods of time as opposed to let's get 10 guys that go in and out in 1 year. I think that can be really hard to sustain and maintain a culture.
Do you see it as there's almost a presumed risk for any CCHA team in terms of how they recruit, right? That same sentiment could be said to Bowling Green, BSU, or Michigan Tech, where you're bringing in all these new players and you don't know if it's going to work, and everybody's kind of has to go through this baptism by fire moment where it could work really well, and the teams that didn't choose to bring in any CHL players maybe suffer from it because maybe the CHL is really on that different level of major juniors compared to the USHL or the NHL, or maybe these kids aren't ready. Maybe playing against 16 and 18-year-olds and having to make that jump going from 21 to 24-year-olds is a huge adjustment, and loading up your team with CHL kids is a disadvantage, at least for the immediate start to a season. There's so much unknown that it just feels like there's always going to be this presumed risk right now, no matter what recruiting route a CCHA team takes.
Yeah, I liken it this way. I'm not going to take all of my money and put it into Boeing stock. Obviously not right now. But you have to diversify. If you don't diversify, you become this just you incur a lot of risk. And I think one of the great examples of that over the last several years in the CCHA is Northern Michigan. At the end of the Grant Patulny era, the last several years, they went very portal heavy, and they got a lot of guys. I was like, dang, that guy's really good. Dang, that guy's really good. But for some reason, it never fit together. And they would go through these weird stretches where where's all the goal scoring that guy did at the last school? Where's the great defending that guy did at the last school? So it was kind of mystifying with them. And that's, the risk of, if you build your team entirely through the transfer portal, you don't necessarily know what you're getting in terms of personality. You might know on film what guys look like, but when you're trying to implement them into your system, a stat line is not a system fit. Wow, that guy scored 20 goals. I want him on my team. But when you ask him to back check, what's it going to look like? So I think that's why you have to diversify. It's great to get older guys. Ferris got, my last year, we got Matt Slick, who was the least stylistically fun player to watch in the world, but he was physical, mean. He was all subs, no style. He's one of my favorite players we ever had. Great personality. And that's a case of, you recruit the guy out of the portal, you figure out, is he a personality fit, and you work him into your lineup. Whereas I feel like some coaches are like, wow, that guy scored 25 goals. He had 40 points last year, and he doesn't want to be at the school he was at. Let's just throw all the money we can at him. So you have to be really smart and targeted and know the motivation to the kids. And it's no different for CHL kids. Why do you want to go to college as opposed to try to go to the pros? Have you been developmentally stunted? Are you just looking for a change of scenery? You never know. And those are young kids that are not, I don't want to call them immature, but there's a really big difference between an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old freshman. From a maturity standpoint, we had guys that came into Ferris. I'll never forget this. We had a 21-year-old freshman who came into Ferris engaged. And I was like, oh, that's totally different. You're not going to see that with CHLers. They're just in a different phase of life.
Yeah.
I to piggyback off that a little bit too, I liken it to, it's similar to Augustana 3 years ago, really, when they started this program, because they built their team obviously through the transfer portal as well as a pretty big freshman class, but there was an intentionality. And I think that's kind of the thing that a lot of these schools in the CCHA, when they look to the transfer portal to fill holes, and sort of design these teams, there has to be an intentionality. You have to find the right kind of player, the right kind of fit for a program. I see that a lot though on this roster when I'm looking at it. And Harrison, I'm curious from your perspective, is there a guy amongst these 13 newcomers, these 13 guys in the transfer portal that you see as sort of being that player who can have an impact right away and spark this team right away?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about Max Dukovac. I think that's the one guy that I can tell you that I've seen him and I know what he looks like on the ice. Some of these guys I haven't seen a lot of, just to be frank with you. Mm-hmm. But I know I've seen him and I know I see talent there. I think he could potentially do it. You look at Carter Rapalji and he had 17 goals last year. Yeah, granted it was kind of a weird independent schedule, but if you can score 17 goals against Division I goaltenders, it's not nothing. I mean, I'm sure he can come over here and be a 10-goal scorer. I would hope at least. I think it's going to be by committee. Some of these guys that came out of the Big Ten, I'm always curious to see what they look like when they move over to schools to get kind of a different opportunity. Caden Brown out of Ohio State's a good example of that. I'm trying to think who else. They got Brian Morse from Maine, who's younger. Didn't play last year, redshirt freshman. I think there's maybe some intrigue in what's he going to look like. Tanner Rowe, transfer from Michigan. I don't think he had any points last year, but that's a guy that could maybe fit your bottom six, kind of a grinder build. And I think Ferris is going to have to be a team that does it by committee. I don't think you're going to look at the stat sheet and be like, oh, they got a guy with 40 points this year. I think that might come later in the Brett Riley tenure. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I am wrong. And Tyler Schleppe, shuts me up and scores 30 goals or something like that. But I think it's going to have to be by committee. It's a lot of mystery to this team. And that can be a good thing. It can be a tough thing to play against and defend and not know, where the shots or offense are going to come from.
Is there a series that you're most looking forward to this season where it may be a road trip or just maybe a litmus test series or maybe an in-conference series that you kind of have circled for the Dogs this year?
The non-conference series I really want to see. I'm going to go down and see them play at Western. I'm always really intrigued when you get an opportunity like our football team at Ferris did this a few years back, where
national champions, by the way.
Yeah, 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
Powerhouse.
I think it was 2013, 14, or 15. I can't remember. They went to play North Dakota State on the road. And you guys, I'm sure, being in the area of the country you're in, you know about the Fargo Dome.
Oh, yeah.
Carson Wentz and all those guys. I mean, great football out of the Fargo Dome. We're a D2 school that is, like, at the time, like, just coming to prominence. And our coach wanted to go play them in a game, and he goes, I want our guys to be on the field for the national championship banner ceremony. I want them to see what a champion looks like. And I think for Brett Riley, this is awesome. His guys get to be in a rink in an extraordinarily hostile environment and watch them not raise not 1, not 2, but 3 banners, and their crowd go off. So I think, to me, it's a great opportunity for Brett Riley to be like, this is what that looks like. This is where we're trying to go. And for the younger guys in the program that are going to be back for several years, I think there's a huge impact in something like that. I always look forward to other trips, like going up to Michigan Tech. I think just such an amazing environment. Easily, in my opinion, the best place in college hockey to call a game as a broadcaster because of where they put you and the setup that they have there. That's always kind of on my list. It's hard to say because I don't really know just what the teams look like. I'm obviously interested to see what Bowling Green looks like stylistically with all those CHL guys. That's going to be an interesting team. I think that could be extremely boom or bust.
Yeah.
And I hope for their sake, boom. But you just never know what that's going to look like.
All right. We've done this with everybody that we've had on there, our 2 guests that we've had on prior to you. So we'll do this with you as well, Harrison. Finish the sentence. Ferris State will have a successful season if blank happens.
Ooh. A lot of things have to happen. Not in a bad way.
Right. Well, I no.
Yeah, I think Ferris State will have a successful season if – this is going to sound like such a cop-out. If everybody in the team has meshed by about, like, Thanksgiving.
It's honestly the truth, though, right? Like, I mean, you're talking about – that's just the reality of the situation here, I think.
Yeah. And what is success? Either, to me – success for them this year would be I want them to be in a position to go for a home ice spot the last weekend of the regular season. I think that's success for them. If it takes them into the second half of the year to be like, okay, we're still figuring each other out, I think that could be challenging. Once you start playing games and getting stuff on tape and getting real in-season practice time, it shouldn't happen quick, but I would hope in the first 6 to 10 weeks of the season they can start to figure out who each other are and, I guess, form an identity. If they can form an identity going, into December, I think that would give me a lot of hope that they can be in that swing for home ice the last weekend.
I want to throw another twist on it of if I were to answer that question, and I think a big part of this where that could help that process along is if they're able to establish a true top line. If you're able to find 3 guys that mesh really well and you 15 minutes left in the third period, you're down a goal and you're looking for a line to go get you that goal. If they can find that line and that filters into the power play and they're able to find a true number 1 penalty kill unit, if they're able to just establish kind of that top tier group for each area that they need to fill through the portal and with this big turnover, that to me feels like the key to get Ferris State into this top half of the league, which I think everybody deep down, whether they're willing to admit it or not, Ferris State is right there. They were last in the league in power play and penalty kill, and they still finished 6th in the league and were trending upwards in that second half last year. In theory, this team should have the ability to do that again and be in a similar spot where you're competing for that top half. And if they're able to establish those things a little bit sooner and find those go-to guys, whether it's on the power play, the penalty kill, or in a top line on even strength. That feels like a big step in the right direction towards getting home ice.
Yeah, and I think, two of the guys that I would think would be in the mix for that would be Gavin Best, Tyler Schleppe.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that those are the two guys that offensively I know are adept within the CCHA. I know those guys can go and get goals. I think between the two of them, it was 19 goals last year, which is a solid number. But I think that number could be more like 25 to 30 between the two of them. And maybe those guys will have to get split up. But those are two guys I look for to be on the top line. And that's like the one thing in my time broadcasting at Ferris the last several years that we struggled to figure out was who is the top line. The last great top line I can think of, it was just like whatever line Gerald Mayhew and Corey Mackin are on is the top line. Whether they were together or apart, usually together. That was how you did it. And it's been a while since they've had that. I think there's an opportunity for that for sure this year. Somebody's probably going to have to emerge and surprise us that, maybe halfway through the year we'll be talking about maybe it'll be Max Dukovac, maybe it'll be somebody else. But yeah, I think that's a really good one that I didn't bring up earlier that I probably should have thought of.
Let's get into the league at large here. We got a few more for you just about the CCHA and maybe just some of your thoughts on kind of how this plays out. We're kind of looking just for you can rank these top four as you want. But who are your top four teams and in the CCHA regular season to get that home ice in the Mason Cup playoffs, and then who do you like to win the McNaughton?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think in no particular order. I like Michigan Tech. I really like Bill McCall. I think he's very smart, very sharp. I think that'll work up there. I think it'll be a quicker transition probably than what we have at Ferris because it's going to be very different stylistically. Bill McCall has a lot of familiarity with the program immediately. I think he'll be able to hit the ground running, and it's a good roster. Obviously, they bring back some good offensive talent. I think beyond that, I'm going to push my chips into the table on Bowling Green. I think they'll at least be in the top four. It might be like hold on to the seat of your pants for like a little while, watch it play. But I think that eventually they're well coached. I think they'll figure that out. I can never count Minnesota State out of it. They're awesome. I'm wondering where some of the offense is going to come from this year, but there have been years I've wondered that, and it's like, who's Cade Borchert? Why does he have 30?
Yeah.
It seems like they churn those guys out every year, and you're like, who is this guy? I didn't even hear of him when they were recruiting him. So I've been in the mix. And then St. Thomas. I think St. Thomas is the best player in the league. Lucas Wallen's awesome.
So good.
I remember I saw him play as a freshman, and I remember the first time he went up a wall with a puck. I was like, oh, this kid's going to be a problem. This kid's going to be a real problem. He can't handle his speed. He plays at such great pace. I think they'll be in the mix. They could be a little up and down at times, but I really love his game. And I think anytime you have the best player in the league, you give yourself a pretty good chance at least fighting for home ice.
Lucas Wallen, a null 3, one of the rare null 3 D1 hockey players.
I don't even, I didn't know that. But it's stunning. And, again, you just see him skate. He skates like he's in the NHL.
Yeah.
He's crazy. As for the McNaughton Cup, God, the Michigan Tech group chat's going to go off when I say this.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Save yourself.
I think it's going there. I think Bill is such a good coach.
I love Bill. We had him on a couple months ago. It was a great chat. It was just a really great interview.
I didn't mention Bemidji or Augustana. It wouldn't surprise me for either of those to be in the top 3. I don't want to disrespect them either. It's a tough league, and I wouldn't want to play either of them in the first round of the playoffs. I'll tell you that. Especially the way they're coached. So hopefully nobody listens to oh, he didn't mention our team. It's no, it's just it's hard to pull State out of the top 4.
I'm in the same boat though, Harrison, with when I look at a team like Ferris State. I put my top 4 together and I'm like, man, it would not surprise me in the slightest if Ferris State snuck in and got that 4, got that 3. I don't know that they're quite going to be a top 2 team in this conference with the way it is, but just the way everybody kind of looks going into it, it really does kind of make you wonder like how this thing shakes up. Maybe more so with those top like 6 teams in the conference. I feel like, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, as much as I think Northern's going to be better, I just do still have a lot of questions. You know, Lake State's going to have to really fix some things up on the back end to be a contender, I think. But other than those two, I mean, the rest of this conference, I don't know what to make of it.
It's very wide open. It's not like a year where you're like, oh yeah, that team's going to win and they're going to win by 10 points. Like, it's, I think the McNaughton will go down to the last game of the regular season. I think it's going to be Michigan Tech. Yeah, they're going to, I don't know. They're just going to be like, oh, he likes us. I love their fans. They're so fun, but they're
the best
in a good way.
Yeah.
That's the 3 of us should try to make a trip up there at some point. Let's get together and go. If you haven't experienced it, we need to experience it together.
Well, I want to go in the summer. I mean, when we had Bill on the show, I told him that. I think Dave, we talked to him about that too. I got to go in the summer because it's just beautiful in the summer. And I actually had some friends who just went to the UP this last summer, and we're just like, dude, you've got to go.
Oh, it's amazing. I'm going camping in October there. A couple of my best friends are one's from Hancock, which is just across the canal, another from Ontonagon, which is a little further west. Those were some of my favorite trips, even in the snow.
Yeah.
There's one particular, this is great. This is a good Bob memory I can leave you with. When you leave the hotel from downtown, you have to go up this really steep hill to get to the rink at Michigan Tech. And we're on a bus, and I'm like, this hill's very icy. And there's a sidewalk, and the kids are, either going back down to their apartments or downtown from campus or from like the ice arena or wherever they were. But we would be driving up this hill, crawling, and people would be sliding on their, like, just on their rear end down this hill. And, it didn't look like anyone was being seriously hurt, but we were all kind of snickering to ourselves on the bus. And one year we're coming back down that hill, and our assistant coach, Mark Kaufman, had bought crampons to do the hill, like to walk the hill. And we're going down the hill in the bus. And I always had worries that the bus was never going to be able to stop at the bottom. But, like, I'm looking out the window. I see him in the crampons just kind of like, and Bob's in front of me just like, just for some reason they got me so good.
Oh, that's great.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, the interesting thing every year for the CCHA now is, will they ever shed the one bid league reputation, right? And when we think of the CHL era and how CCHA coaches predominantly were at the forefront of wanting this era to come to college hockey, it should, in theory, over time, create more parity. And the rising tide lifts all boats mantra, where the bottom is going to get better in the grand scheme of college hockey. And so for this year, maybe it's a little too early on that, but how many teams make the NCAA tournament, and which teams do it?
Okay, I'm going to say 2. I think you brought up a good point about it. I think the bottom will be up. I think there's not going to be like an Alaska Anchorage and Alabama Huntsville, like lurking at the bottom with 2 wins. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be that bad. I have some questions with Northern and Lake State, but I think generally with the way teams have built their rosters this year, they've insulated themselves from being just downright bad. So, in league, there will be some like cannibalization of like the 8th place team just went on the road and got 5 out of 6 points at the 2nd place team. But I think Michigan Tech will get in. I feel pretty good about that. It feels very challenging to leave Minnesota State out, but I think I'll get saucy and say St. Thomas.
Yes.
Okay. That's Jared's pick.
Yeah.
When you said that you don't see a team winning the league by 10 points, I'm actually in the other side of it.
You think they're going to run away?
I see St. Thomas run. I think this is the year. Their transfer portal class is outstanding, and I think they replaced Jake Seibel with an even more talented goalie, just in terms of prospect resume and whatnot. Now, will Carson Musser live up to Jake Seibel? Probably not. Jake Seibel ended up being one of the best goalies in this conference over the last 2 years, but they still brought back Lucas Wallen. That team hit another gear. I know they have to replace 4 of their top 5 scorers, but when you do it with that transfer portal class and you get to introduce the new rink and all the new resources that come with it, this feels like the year where St. Thomas hits another gear. And I wonder how much that gear is able to be hit by the fact that they're just able to make the NCAA tournament. What does that do for a psyche in a locker room? And, a coach can say, yeah, it's a bummer we can't make it to the NCAA tournament because the, X, Y, and Z, this NCAA rule or whatever. All of that's gone. And no matter how much they say it doesn't matter, it matters. And I think this is the year where St. Thomas takes that large step forward. And when we look at Minnesota State with all of the roster turnover they've had, Bowling Green, you called them boom or bust. I agree. I think you have to put Bemidji State in there, boom or bust, too, with the amount of CHL kids they have. Michigan Tech, to some extent. Michigan Tech's the only team in the CCHA that brought in multiple kids out of the CHL who haven't aged out this year. How does that impact, going from playing that younger style in the CHL for kids who are 18 now having to play against 24-year-olds? I see so many, this team will do it if this team will do it if this. And when I look at St. Thomas's, this team will do it if this, it's just if they can replace their departing scoring from last year, which is a common thing for college hockey teams. If you can replace the production last year, you should be able to find yourself a similar spot. And I love Rico Blasi's ability to do that as a guy who's won over 400 games in replacing the production that he lost last year. And so I do see St. Thomas as a heavy favorite in this league, but I believe I am in the minority there.
Harrison, I do want to point out, with that whole rant being said, when that media poll comes out next week and you see that 1 next to St. Thomas, you know who it came from.
That's fine.
This guy has been.
I don't have any issue with you picking them to win by a lot. But again, the question is just replacing some of that scoring. Does a goalie live up to it? And
right.
I think there is some pressure on them with them, moving on out of the league. I think that other teams will walk into that rink and there's a pretty good playbook out on how they play now.
Yeah.
I do think that rink they played in did play to their strengths because it was pretty chaotic. And I don't know how many times you guys have been in that rink. That is
plenty.
Enough. Once.
One of my least favorite places. I call it the meat locker. It just reminded me of Rocky, like hammering away at the cows.
The concessions, man. You can't beat those concession prices, though.
Yeah, no, oh my God. The first time I went in there, I didn't realize how bad it was going to be. And the next day we were staying at Mall of America. I went into Mall of America into like a hiking store and bought like a beanie and a hoodie. It was like October. Like it wasn't even that yet. But I was like, no, I can't. I'm going to have to do this game in a hoodie.
Yeah.
And it was funny. Bob had his suit jacket on, but I was like, why does he look so puffy? At one point he like opened up his suit jacket to like grab something. He needed his winter like puff jacket underneath. Like, freezing away down there. But like it was like weird. The boards were kind of wonky. Like weird stuff would happen. Pucks would like get rimmed around and they'd kick out in front. Like I think for some reason that rink really played to their strength, and not that the new one won't. I think it's just really hard to get a foothold in the CCHA and just go off. Yeah. Like, so that's the only reason I don't see him winning by 10, but I respect your pick, and I don't necessarily have a big issue with it.
You mentioned, because I would imagine you've met Brian Schultz from the Beaver Ring.
Oh yeah, I know Schultz.
Schultz, absolute character, by the way. But nobody hated the St. Thomas Ice Arena more than Schultz. I mean,
I can remember for his money on that. I didn't like it either.
BSU played in a Saturday-Sunday series against St. Thomas last year, and I think the Sunday game was like a 6 p.m. puck drop. And when you bring in Schultz, having bundled up 2 winter hats over it, and I don't think he said one word to me or to anybody when the mic wasn't on for that game. He was in and out and absolutely hated that rink with every bone in his body. And so I don't think there's a more excited person for the Lee and Penny Anderson Arena or whatever it's called than Ryan Schultz.
No. Schultz definitely knows the temperature of a room when he walks into it. Not just like that, not just that it's cold in there, but I mean like the actual like how people are doing. And the best example of this is, if you remember the Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary against the Lions, he came to Big Rapids the next weekend, walked into our press box in full Packers garb, and I was like, I hate this guy. I don't like this guy. Schultz and I are cool. But I was not happy at that moment. I was like, I don't need this right now from you, man.
Oh, yeah. No,
take it off.
Every Tuesday during the season, it's just an NFC North war in the media room because I'm a huge Vikings guy. Schultze's a huge – Schultze this is a side tangent. Now we're going way off topic, but this is good for all the NFC North fans. But they played in the Packers played in an NFC divisional round game 2 years ago, and BSU had a road trip in Houghton in Michigan Tech, and so Schultze, the game starts 5 local time. I think the Packers game goes off right as the hockey game's ending. So he wraps up as fast as he can. I think it was probably the fastest a Beaver Radio Network post game has ever been conducted. And he puts the game on his phone and he starts driving home. He didn't go on the team bus to Houghton. He drove home so he could listen to the Packers game on the road and not have to hear Sarah Torrey talk on speakerphone for 5 hours on the way home. So, because Tom will call the same 5 or 6 people on every road trip and just sit in the front of the bus with a speakerphone just like this. And that's a whole other thing. But so he's driving home, but Schultze knows of the 25-minute gap where the radio station shifts from Michigan to Wisconsin, and there's a dead zone where he doesn't get any cell phone service. So he pulls up the radio, pauses it, and then he sits in silence for 25 minutes, waits to get cell phone service, and then starts the game. And he's living 25 minutes in the past listening to the Packers. Little does he know the Packers blow a multi-score lead in the fourth quarter and lose. And then he has to show up back at the BSU media room and come to my face being like, hey, Schultze, how was the Packer game? And, he wasn't thrilled that day. So, but he's the best.
Yeah. I can, since I promised, I left this story for the end.
Let's hear it.
So years ago, I was not on this trip. This story has been told to me many times. It's one of my favorite stories. The team was on their way back from Alaska, and they were taking the red eye from Fairbanks to Seattle or Anchorage to Seattle. I can't remember which one it was. Probably Fairbanks, but our assistant coach, Mark Kaufman, left his cell phone in the terminal. He's on the plane. He's like, oh no, I can't have this. And he's trying to stop the flight attendant. And this is just more of a story of our staff, not necessarily a Bob story, but just the hijinks our staff get into.
Yeah.
He stops the flight attendant. He goes, listen, I left my cell phone out there. I really need to go back out and get it. And, it's kind of not going very well. They don't usually like you deplaning like that. Finally goes, I'm the team doctor and I have my patients in there. He is the assistant coach, no medical credentials. He goes out and gets his phone because the lady's like, oh, you're a team doctor. We gotta let it go out. Well, of course, halfway through the flight, ding, is there a doctor on board this plane? Doctor? He had to swallow it. He was like, not a doctor. We have never let him forget this. So his nickname now is Dr. Kaufman. And we it was just stuff like that all the time with that.
That's
staff.
amazing.
Yeah, and that was not super long ago.
This is like a sitcom, man.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
That's an episode of Curb. That's a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode.
It 100% is, man. It's the handicap lane or the what is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was I do want to say there was another doctor on board and the person was fine. So it didn't end tragically, but that's what makes it funny.
I'm
Yeah,
surprised you didn't get put on a no-fly list after that one.
Oh man.
I think he got a lot of dirty looks the way back. But,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, that's one of my favorite. That staff in general, just so much
Oh,
good
man.
stuff, man.
Oh, that's great. Harrison, this is all we have for you. We've taken way too much of your time today, so thank you so much for hopping on. This was a blast.
Yeah, no problem.
We
Good
appreciate
talking
it,
to you.
man.
Appreciate it. All right. All right. Once again, thank you to Harrison Waugh for joining the show, and thank you to our producer, Perry Lascaris. Subscribe to the CCHA Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from, and subscribe to the CCHA on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Trent Singer and at Jared Rubado BP. You can check out our work at BemidjiPioneer.com and SiouxFallsLive.com.